Laurie Huston's News for the Heart is dedicated to helping you give a voice to your own soul. Our hearts have the power to free us from pain and the struggles that keep us from awakening to our true essence. Join Laurie now as we delve into our heart and soul to find the path that will open us to the possibilities and lead us to the life we love to live.
And good afternoon. This is News for the Heart. And today, well, it's the last Tuesday of the month, which means I have Tom Campbell with me, which is always a great time. Just to let everybody know, we're now on Amazon, so you can say, "Hey Alexa, let's listen to News for the Heart," Tom Campbell, and we'll find the shows. So that's exciting. Anyway, it is near the end of October. Yes, we could talk about Halloween, but I don't think we're going to go there this year. We've already had our Canadian Thanksgiving. It's the beginning of October, but you guys are getting yours at the end of November. So we thought we'd talk about gratitude, because that's kind of the energy that we all should start embracing as we move into the holiday season. One of the things I know about gratitude is that if you do it from your heart, your whole heart, then it usually is a very powerful experience. A lot of people like to say they're thankful, but if they don't do it from the heart, it's not quite as empowering. It certainly brings a lot more love when you can really just free yourself up and just be really grateful. So thought we'd talk about that. I know we usually talk about it coming up at this time of year, but I think we can bring in some new stuff. So welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you, Laurie. Yeah, gratitude is it's a real powerful concept that we don't do much with most of the time. It's not something that people do unless they're prompted to do it. And it's one of those things that it's the counterweight, or it's the opposite of, self-centeredness. It's the opposite of me. It's the opposite of complaining. It's the opposite of anger, all those things that are trouble. If you think about it, that gratitude just pulls in the opposite direction of all of those negative things. It's all about what's good, what's positive in your life, not what's wrong with your life. And we tend to dwell on what's wrong. We tend to dwell on what we don't like, on, what the problems are, and that consumes our minds and our time and our attention. Everything is on what's wrong. All the news you get is all about what's wrong. All of the movies that you see are all movies about conflict and what's wrong. And, the heroes have to overcome the evildoers. And there's a big emphasis on seeing the world in terms of what's wrong. And gratitude is just the opposite. It's looking at what's right, and what is good, and what is, pleasant and profitable, and all those things. So gratitude would be a great counterbalance to this huge mass of negativity and what's wrong that we generally have in our lives every day, all day long. We always think about the negative side of things, and we don't very often stop to ponder the positive side of things. What's right? What are the good things? And if we really did that more often, we'd probably be happier. We'd probably smile more and feel better. We'd probably get out of our depressions and have better relationships just by refocusing our intention on what's right and what's good. And then if we also focus our attention on not only the stuff that's wonderful and that's good, but just the idea that even the things that we look at that say aren't so good, if we don't see them as, oh no, that's awful, we just see them as that's the way it is. It's just the way it is. It's the way we are, we people who have lots of fear. It's just the way, our culture has grown because of us. Things are just the way they are. And rather than getting upset with them, we could look at those negative things and say, well, yeah, it's like that out there in the world, but I'm going to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So I'm not going to be angry. I'm going to look at positive side of things. And boy, what a difference would that make if we just took a little time for gratitude? Can you imagine if you set even just 15 minutes aside for gratitude every day? That would probably be more powerful than meditation. Meditate on what's positive, and if you just did that 15 minutes a day, it'd probably change your life. It would give you a little pause in the constant litany of what's wrong in your mind and all the problems you have and the things that aren't going the way you want them to. That's, we get so obsessed with the negative that then our lives seem to be nothing but negativity. And then we feel down and depressed. And what's the point? What's the use? Because everything is negative. But that's just not true. Everything isn't negative. There's a lot of positive things going on for you in your life. There's a lot of positive opportunities out there for you. But we don't reach out for them. We don't take them. We don't even notice them. We don't even know they're there. There's lots of things you could do that's positive. I like to use your example of going out and running, Instead of sitting home feeling unhappy because life isn't the way you want it, go do something positive, and taking a long walk is positive. It helps your physical system feel better. And if that feels better, it's easier for you to feel better. It's healthy. That's a positive thing, And there's lots of positive things you can do. There's hundreds of places where you can contribute, where you can volunteer, where you can be part of a solution, you can be helpful. And the neat thing is the more you give, the more you get. And the less you give, the less you get. So if you withdraw into just, it's all about me, you're at the center of your universe and you've just withdrawn to you and all your problems, then you're not attracting those good things. You're not connecting with the positive things in life. You're ignoring them. And then you start to feel like your life is not the way you want it to be, and you're not the way you want to be. And everything sucks, and everything is unpleasant, and everything is, another day, another bunch of problems, And it doesn't have to be that way. It's just attitude. It's just the way you interpret the world. Your reality is your personal reality, and it's your interpretation of the world, of the data you get. And if you interpret it negatively, well, you'll live in a negative world, in a negative space, and you'll be a negative person, and you'll tend to complain a lot, and you'll tend to feel negative towards yourself and toward other people, and you'll just live the life of negativity rather than living the life of gratitude, which is looking at the positive things, doing the positive things, being healthy, taking care of yourself, taking care of other people, sharing, interacting. And when you run into a downer, you just let it slide off your back like water off a duck. You just, people are like that. You can't take on everybody's problem is not really about you. It's mostly about them. And there's not much you can do about it. And just reacting to things negatively isn't helping. You're just throwing more negativity out there in the world. So gratitude is a marvelous concept. It's just the opposite of everything that's basically wrong. It's the positive thing. We look at what's right. And 15 minutes a day of just sitting down and thinking about all the good things, most of which we take for granted. We don't even see them as good things. We just take all that stuff for granted. We focus on the bad stuff. We focus on what makes us unhappy. And all the nice things that happen in our life, well, they just happen. We take them for granted and don't pay any attention to them. That's a matter of perspective that anybody can change. You just have to change how you look at things, how you interpret reality. And you'd find that things aren't nearly as bad as you make yourself feel by dwelling on the negative. They really aren't that bad. You're just kind of in a continual mope, in a continual, oh no kind of attitude. And if you stay in oh no attitude very long, you become a depressed, anxious, person who just is not happy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that's the key. I think gratitude is very much where we need to go. If we could do that, we'd all feel better.
Yeah. Even when, as you said, even when things aren't going the way you want them to, even when you get sick out of nowhere or something just happens, if you can, because we don't know the bigger picture, if you can sort of stop and just say, okay, well, one, what did I learn from this? Or two, what gift did this give? Because there's always some perspective that we can come up with that we can be grateful, regardless of what is occurring in our life. Okay, there's some things that that there are people that are going to go, but what about this? It's like, well, yes, but did that happen to you? Or are you just like trying to pick out the worst thing that could possibly happen and say, well, what about that? It's like, well, I mean, not many, they happen. There's terrible things that happen to kids. There's terrible things. There's terrible diseases. There's stuff. But, if you were to look at those kids, most of those kids, I mean, thinking about Africa, for example, the poverty or anywhere in poverty in the world, most of those kids are still happy because they're kids. They can shift their perspective. They don't focus on, all the negative things. I mean, I'm from Canada. We focus on the weather all the time. All the time. We all have, too hot in the summer, it's too cold in the winter, it's too windy, it's too this, is blah. We could talk about the weather that could be everybody's conversation. But we tend to, you're right, we tend to look at all the things that are wrong. And that's interesting. I don't know. I think it comes from news. I think it comes from just the way people interact. It's like we get so much energy from being negative instead of, realizing how much more we can get if we're positive.
Yeah. Yes. Well, part of the problem, and a big part of the problem, is that our culture, our environment, our friends, our neighbors, everybody's caught in that same trap of negativity. So everywhere you look, when you talk to people, you talk about, negative things. You talk about the things you don't like for the most part, the problems, the difficulties you're having. Anything that's going on in your life that's positive is not worth talking about. It's just the focus that people have. So yes, you watch TV, you go to the movies, you read a book that's full of negativity, negative people, struggling against, people struggling against negativity. It's all about negativity. And you talk to people, they talk about, I got sick and I got that, and my boss is a jerk and he did this, and I got a flat tire, and it just goes on and on and on, because that's all the things worth talking about. That's unfortunate. So we live in this, we're bathed in negativity. We live in this negative space all the time. Everybody's complaining. Everybody's telling everybody else what's wrong, and what's wrong with them, and what's wrong with the politics, and what's wrong with the weather, what's wrong with, anything. It's always what's wrong is the focus. So it's our whole culture is like that. And then asking somebody, well, you need to be positive. Well, if you you really have to be aware of this negativity and how it drags you down into a space of not feeling good. It drags you into, if you were negative for one day, a week or something, well, that wouldn't bother you so much. But it's day after day after day, year after year. You live in a constant sea of complaining and fussing and, evil attacking the good guys. And, it's all about struggle and negativity. And it's hard to even realize there is a positive. That's why gratitude is neglected. Gratitude, it's not something, gratitude sounds like something we should do, but, nobody ever does it. Why? Why is nobody having these positive attitudes? Well, it's partly just the way things are. You have to realize that you're swimming in a sea of negativity and fix that for yourself. Stop taking on all the problems of the world and all the problems of the weather and all the problems of your neighbors and all the problems in politics and all the problems everywhere. Stop taking those on. All of them make you unhappy and they make you anxious and they make you angry, but they're not yours to solve. They're just there. It's just the way we are. We're a bunch of people with a lot of fear. So we tend to focus on the negative. Fear is a negative thing. We're full of fear. We focus on the negative. That's why our cultures and our environments are so negative, because we are. It's just where humanity is in their growth. They're still thinking very negatively and focus on the negative. It won't always be that way. And it doesn't have to be that way for any individual. You can rise up above that and just stop it once you see it. But I guess that's the point. Most people don't see it. That's just where they live. They live in a state of constant complaining and frustration and anger and disappointment, and things aren't the way they want them. Well, things aren't going to be necessarily the way you want them. There are going to be challenges. There are going to be bosses that are jerks, but that's part of life. You need to deal with that positively, not grouse about it, complain about it, fuss about it. But how do you deal with that? Well, you could find another job, but maybe that's not the best solution. Maybe you need to deal with that negativity of that boss in a positive way. Don't take it personally. It's not your problem, really. It's the boss's problem. Your problem is how to deal with it positively. That's your problem. The boss's problem is the boss's issue. So if he's negative or he says, whatever, how do you work with that? Well, you learn how to not push his buttons. You learn how to, don't be at the wrong place at the wrong time. You learn how to work with it and be positive about it. Say, okay, I need a job. This is a good job. I don't like my boss, but how can I optimize that situation and still enjoy going to work? Well, you focus on the positive things. Avoid the negative things. Don't do those things that cause other people to be negative. So you can pretty much fix your environment without changing any of the people in your environment, just by changing your own attitude. So yeah, gratitude is a wonderful place. Instead of wallowing in self-pity, we should wallow in gratitude. We should constantly be saying, oh yeah, see, it's really cold outside right now, but I'm nice and warm in my house. And there isn't any wind in here in my house, blowing me around or anything. It's very pleasant. Wow, that's awesome, because, it's only been for the last probably 0.5% of humanity's experience that people could sit in a warm place, when it was cold outside, and sit in a dry place when it's wet outside. That wasn't possible for 99.999% of the time that humans have been evolving. So, wow, look at the advantages we have. Wow, look at all the information that is at our fingertips. You know, look at the richness. You know, we can go get in a car and drive 50 miles and see something neat. We have, you know, we can do things online, and oh, this is really a time of great opportunity. Gee, instead of watching TV, maybe I should take some courses on the internet. You know, they're free, and I could learn a lot about whatever, you know, whatever your interest is. You know, geology, rocks, gems, flowers, arranging flowers. You know, there's just tons of stuff out there that's available. And instead of watching TV, why don't you do something that's fun, something that helps you grow and has a, you know, gives you a bigger perspective. I mean, something must interest you, you know. You should be able to find things that you think are interesting, whether it's cars or hairstyles or whatever. You know, there's things that you can find out there and learn about and get involved in, become part of.
You could get onto YouTube and be there for years.
Exactly. You could be there for years and, yeah, and not even scratch the surface. And you could just learn all kinds of things. You know, you can go onto YouTube and find a lot of lectures at universities. You know, a lot of those have been photographed. You know, movies were made, videos were made of the professor doing his thing, because sometimes students can't come or whatever. So they often do videos so that students who couldn't make it, or maybe there's even students that are remote, you know, that are online. And a lot of that gets put out on YouTube. It's entirely free. Yeah, you can get some great educational stuff that's available instead of sitting around watching a bunch of miserable people make each other more miserable, you know, on television. Why don't you go learn something new, you know, become positive.
Look at all your videos. You've done whole workshops on there, so you could lots of people. I mean, yeah. Hours and hours.
I got over 1,000 hours of videos out there. Over 1,000 hours of video. Yeah, you could just watch my videos for probably a year and not run out of them. But you know, I'm just one person. There's you know, thousands of people like me that put all kinds of information out there. And sure, a lot of it is junk that you're not interested in. Well, that's all right. Somebody else is interested in that junk. You know, you're interested in your own things, but it's out there. Learn all kinds of things. You know, learn how to, you know, replace the rear view mirror on your car because yours is cracked. You know, well, you'll find a YouTube video that'll tell you exactly how to do that. Whatever, you know, something that'll let you change the screen on your laptop. Your screen isn't working. Well, it's not hard to do. There's lots of videos, sure. So there's so many things that you could do that are actually positive in your life, help you learn, help you grow, help you understand. And you know, sit around and watch some, you know, negative thing, you know, whether it's a sitcom where everybody's being rude to each other, you know, and then we laugh at the rudeness because we think rudeness is funny, you know, or whether we, you know, watching some people getting murdered and then other people trying to track them down, you know, that's not stuff that leaves you feeling great afterwards. You know, that's stuff that just night after night, hour after hour, that puts you into a funky space where you start to just become more negative, and pretty soon you're addicted to all that negativity and you want to see the next episode, and it's not good. You know, that's where we are though as a culture. But any individual can rise above that culture and change that. You just have to change your perspective and your attitude. And you've got total control over your perspective and your attitude. You don't need anything. You don't need to spend any money. You don't need to go anywhere. You've got it right there. Just control your attitude and your perspective. And wow, you'll have a whole new life in front of you that's positive instead of negative.
And
It's
try not
just,
to get caught up in the conspiracy theories that are out there, because then you just go down a rabbit hole that will take you for.
yeah, well, yeah, they're almost all very negative. It's all about fear, right? All the conspiracies are about fear, why you should fear this and why you should fear that, and how these evil people are doing this. It's all negative. It's all about fear. And people who are fearful focus on other fearful things. So if you have people who are fearful and they run into a conspiracy theory, if they're very fearful, they hold on to that because that justifies their own negative, fearful attitude by this negative, fearful attitude. And there's a resonance that goes on, and they get sucked right into it, hook, line, and sinker, because it talks to them. It speaks to them, Oh, yeah, woe is me. They feel sorry for themselves. I'm downtrodden. And it's not my fault. It's the fault of the government. It's the fault of, the place I work. It's everybody else's fault but mine. And now I see all those people are really out to get me. And it just resonates. Oh, yeah, I can believe that. Yeah, they're all out to get me. That's the problem. It's not me. It's them, you see. And, of course, that is just the opposite of what's true. It's not them, it's you. That's where the problem is, and you are the only one who can fix it. So yeah, all the junk, of course, it's also out on the internet and also on YouTube. That is all about fear, fearful stuff, what we should fear and why we should fear it.
It's a hard one, because
and
they're looking for the truth, and then they got caught up in this rabbit hole that just keeps going.
Well, it resonates with them. That's why it catches them. People who are not fearful, they look at that and say, how could anybody believe that? How could anybody be sucked in by that? It's so obviously, trash. But if it resonates with you because you're fearful, then you believe everything about it. And the people who don't believe it, well, they just don't understand. They're naive and they just don't understand. We insiders that are smart and understand these things, you see. So it's a way of them patting themselves on the back for their insight and their understanding, blaming somebody else for the problems. And that just feels good. So you resonate with that and go on. And it's not just conspiracy theories. And it's not that there are no conspiracies. Of course there's conspiracies. There's all kinds of conspiracies out there. But mostly they're conspiracies like, the people who do marketing. They look at human psychology and try to figure out how can they trick people to give them their money. So, if you take your maraschino cherries and you soak them in red dye so they're bright and shiny red, you'll sell more of them than if they're kind of brownish red, which would be the natural color of a cherry that's been sitting in a bottle for 3 months. And it doesn't appeal as much. So a bright, shiny red one that has toxic red dye that'll give you cancer if you eat too many of them, but it looks good. So, the marketers, you could say marketing's a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy to manipulate us, get our money, sell us products. Well, yeah, that's true. There are conspiracies out there. There's all sorts of people trying to manipulate you to get your money and to get your mind, to get you to think the way they want you to think, do what they want you to do. But you should be an adult. You should grow up enough to realize that you're in charge. You don't have to fall for all that stuff. You don't have to be kind of a non-thinking robot going through life. You can say, oh, look at those cherries. They glow in the dark. Oh, wow. Let me eat some of those. That's wonderful. You should be able to say, I don't think so. I don't need that red dye number 3 that's the carcinogen. I'll eat the cherries that are a little brown, or I won't eat them at all. I'll do without. I don't need that sugary stuff. It's not good for me, not good for my body. So you can just see the world differently. There's conspiracies. lots of people trying to manipulate you. But that doesn't take your free will away. You still have the will to be you. You can lead your life. Nobody makes you sit down and watch TV at night. There's no rule that says you have to do that. Most people do, but it's just a habit because it's easy. It's easier to sit and look than it is to actually search and then learn. Go out on the internet, find a subject that interests you, and then learn something. That takes effort. Sitting and having stuff, sent to you, so all you have to do is be conscious, at least semi-conscious anyway. But you don't have to be aware. You just have to be conscious. And that's kind of, what the vegetable, you act like a conscious vegetable sitting there at night watching your TV night after night after night. And what does that give you? How does that enrich your life? How is that good for your relationships? How does that make your work more profitable? How does that, it doesn't really. It's just kind of mind-numbing stuff that enables you to forget your own personal negativity for a while and instead get involved in somebody else's negativity. So it kind of gets you out of your own head, so you aren't feeling sorry for yourself. You're looking at somebody else that's being abused rather than you. And that's not particularly healthy either. That's not so good. So we just need to take charge and reach out for those opportunities. They're all around us. Things that we could do, things that would leave us happy, things that would leave us feeling better, like walking, like doing exercise, like really eating very, very well, and not just eating stuff because it's there, because it's easy. Relationships, spend time on those relationships. How can you make the people around you feel better? What can you do that will make them happy? Those sorts of things. There's just so many opportunities to have gratitude and to be happy. And it's kind of the numb default sit and, feel sorry for yourself or be entertained, which basically is an escape for most people. That's why they do it. They escape from themselves and their lives and their friends and their families, and they all sit there and watch the tube so they don't have to interact with each other, because if they had to interact with each other, they'd be fussing and complaining, and you didn't do that right, and you didn't do that, and you need to do this, and all that would be going on. So they all sit down and stare at a tube as a way of escaping from each other and from themselves. And yes, they're entertained, but that entertainment really isn't worth much when it comes to their life or their learning or their growth or anything important. It's just not that valuable. Now, there's some things on the tube, I guess there's documentaries and there's other things that you could spend your time on, but that's probably only the 5 or 10% of what's mostly watched. Mostly that's not what people are doing. It's not the National Geographic that most people go to sit down and watch at night. It's the stuff it's the stuff that enables them to escape and look at other people having problems rather than themselves having problems. It's still negativity, but it's somebody else's negativity, not yours. And that can be amusing, or that can be at least distracting.
Yeah.
So, gratitude is a great subject, Laurie. Unfortunately, we don't reach out for it very often.
We think about it at Thanksgiving.
A little bit. Oh, you should give thanks for all this food we're going to eat. Thank you. Now let's eat. Yeah.
Yeah, I do like the idea of when you're with people to do a gratitude, just go around the table and say, what you're grateful for each person. It's kind of a fun way it's kind of what they used to do when you would do it privately and put little notes in a, for each person. Similar. That one's a little bit more, hidden, but yeah, it's nice if you can go on. And people appreciate it too. So it's just that you're right. It's not something we focus on. It's something we very seldomly even think about. It's because we're always focused on the negative.
It takes effort. People are so focused on the negative almost all the time that if you just out of the blue said, well, tell me what you're grateful for, they'd have a hard time. They wouldn't be able to just answer that right away. They'd have to think about that for a while, because that's not something they ever think about. That's kind of way off in left field for them. They're not used to that. So most people would have a hard time. What am I grateful for? Well, be grateful that you don't have all of those, what is it, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It starts at the bottom, right, which is food, shelter, works its way up, and you get to the top, and it's, a good book to read, perhaps, it's something else, but it starts at the bottom, and you should be grateful that those first, 2 or 3 levels are not something you have to struggle with. Well, most people don't. The majority of people on the planet don't struggle that much with those first. Some do still, but most of us in our cultures don't.
Yeah, I think the people that focus in our culture is, again, the negative. It's like the fear of what if in the future, like right now I'm okay, but what if, 2 days from now, or when's the end of the month? It's like we can't, it's almost like we're afraid to be happy. It's like we can't, it's like, I don't know, we're so determined to try and, I don't blame somebody else, or, instead of looking at ourselves, we want to just, it's so much easier to distract ourselves if we're feeling uncomfortable with something, whatever it is, or, blaming somebody else. And that's ultimately where we like to go. Oh, it's the government.
It's true. It's escape from yourselves. There are people who leave a TV or a radio or something playing all the time, even though they're not paying any attention to it, just because that prevents the quiet stillness where they might think about themselves, what they were doing and why they were doing it. And the idea of being alone with yourself is terrifying. They don't particularly like themselves, and they don't particularly like their environment or what they're doing or why they're doing it. They're not happy people. So they need to be constantly distracted, rather than, that's just the opposite of being constantly living in the moment, where you're focused on what you're doing and why you're doing it and how it contributes. You're focused on that. And that's the opposite. You're focused on nothing. You're focused on noise, something outside, or watching other people struggle. Oh, I'm glad that's not me, sort of thing. But it's just this, a product of being self-focused. And when you're self-focused and it's all about you and you're not very happy, then you need to escape that unhappiness. You need not to be there with you, because your life is not positive. But actually, that's not true. There's lots of positive things about your life. And there's lots of other positive things out there that could be a part of your life. It's just you don't let them in. You don't reach out. But it takes effort. It takes effort to find positive things. It takes effort to learn. It takes effort to grow up. It's not something that just happens to you because you exist. You have to reach out for it. You have to reach out and grab it. And that's very difficult for most people to do, because they're so overcome by the uselessness of it all, by the negativity. Why bother? That's sad, but that's where we are. That's the state of the human consciousness, in 2022. It's like that's where we are. Maybe 2052 we'll be in a better space. Maybe it'll be 3052 before we're in a better space. But eventually we'll grow out of this negative miasma of self-pity, I guess, mostly. Woe is me, life isn't the way I want it. Well, life is almost never going to be the way you want it. You should not be looking for life to be the way you want it. You should be looking at life as a challenge for you to contribute as much as you can, not for it to be the way you want it. See, life isn't about you. Life is about what you can contribute, what you can give, not about what you get. So just the idea that, yeah, I'm unhappy because life isn't the way I want it, tells you already there's a problem there. Instead of wanting life and needing life to be a particular way, you should just let life be however it is and learn how to optimize, learn how to be positive, whatever it is, whatever the life is. How can I make this optimal for myself and for everybody else? And if you look at it that way, then this idea of life's not the way I want it just disappears, because life happens and you get to react to it. And then you can react to it positively or you can react to it negatively. But it's never going to be the way you want it, because you're not the master of the universe. You don't get to orchestrate what life is. You're just a participant, and life happens, and it happens to you. Your job is to optimize it in a positive way. How can I get something positive out of this? Okay, something awful just happened. My company just went bankrupt and I got fired. I've got a mortgage to pay. I got people to take care of, and I don't have a job. How am I going to get through? Well, start making a plan. Being angry and upset will just make it less likely that you're going to come out of it good. That's a distraction you don't need. Focus on it. How can I best meet this? What can we do? Where can we go? What other job could I get? Maybe we have to move someplace where there's more jobs. What is it? How do I react to this in a positive way? And then you make your plan and you start working for it. And what you'll find out is that magic happens when you do that. If you're positive and have that positive attitude, things open up for you. You get breaks. You get opportunities. Life starts to open up with opportunity. And then when you're the opposite, oh no, lost my job. Now what am I going to do? This is awful. How am I going to do this? I'm going to have to go get a job flipping burgers for minimum wage. And, my kids are all going to have to, wear rags or something. And we're going to be poor and destitute and have to eat down at the Salvation Army. And, if you have that kind of an attitude, then things don't happen and life is hard, and you end up minimizing rather than maximizing, the opportunities. You don't see the opportunities because you're so busy looking at how awful it is. So it's interesting, and I say it's magical, and that is that if you have this positive attitude, positive stuff just happens. It's just there. With a positive, you get rid of that negativity and open yourself up to positive. Well, we'll do what we can. And if it turns out that the whole family's hungry and we have to have dinner at the rescue mission, well, that's what we'll do. But we'll stick together and we'll work it out. And eventually, I'll find something, or we'll go someplace else. And you have this positive attitude, stuff happens. Because that positive attitude increases the probability of something positive happening for you. And that negative attitude decreases the probability of something positive happening for you. So that positiveness is really, not only does it make you feel better, but it's a solution, for the most part, to your problems. Things happen. So you decide, well, I'm just kind of doing nothing here, and I'm not exercising, I'm not eating well, I'm just sitting here, and you can stay like that. Or you can say, oh, I'm going to go out and start walking. I'm going to start going to the gym. I'm going to Go interact with this group of people that looks like a nice group of people. I'm going to join this group. And you can get out and do things. And when you're positive like that, you join that group and you meet somebody who's just looking for somebody like you in a position that he's got, and bingo, see, something happens and you have a job. Where if you sit around feeling sorry for yourself, nothing happens. So you go out on that walk and you meet people, and some of them are nice people, and you make new friends, and stuff happens. It's just the attitude. As soon as you get positive stuff starts flowing towards you. And instead of sitting around saying, I never get any breaks, nothing ever happens for me, well, that's because you're negative, and you keep lowering the probability of those things happening for you with your negativity. So it's kind of a cycle you get into. It's this negative cycle, but you have to break out of it. You got to be aware of it, see it, and say, I'm not going to be like that. I'm going to try this positive thing. I'm not going to fuss. I'm not going to complain. I'm going to make life positive. And you'll see, stick with that for a year, and you'll see it'll change your life entirely.
Yeah. It's true. So even when you're negative, well, especially when you're negative, if something good were to happen, you probably wouldn't perceive it that way.
No, you'd brush it off.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. We so want to make changes, but when it comes down to it, we're afraid to make changes because we either don't know what that will do, or we think we know because we've tried something before and it didn't work, and we get ourselves all caught up in the what ifs, the should haves, the could haves, and we just don't.
Exactly. We lock ourselves in to the negative cycle, and we don't like it, but we're creating it. Yeah. It's our own creation, and that is a startling thing to realize, that the unhappiness in your life is mostly your own creation. Right. You think it's outside of you. It's the outside world that makes you unhappy. Yeah. But it's not. It's the inside world that's what's making you unhappy. And you're absolutely right. If you're in a negative mood and some person comes up and starts chatting with you, you don't respond. You don't say anything. All you do is complain. When they say something, you complain about it, this and that. And that's not the way to make friends, That's like, who wants to hang out with somebody who's got a big black cloud over their heads, whining and complaining all the time? So yes, and okay, I never meet anybody, nobody ever really likes me. Well, you probably, even if some really nice people show up, you wouldn't have anything to do with them because you already know that it couldn't possibly work out. It couldn't possibly be good because it never is. You have that sort of attitude, which creates exactly what you fear, which is the way fear works. Fear will create what you're afraid of.
Because that's how you perceive it. I mean, even our perceptions are so skewed because our perceptions tend towards whatever it is that we're feeling. And so if we're negative, then, doesn't matter what that person does, we'll see it as something negative instead of, something positive. Yeah.
But what other people do is really not so much negative or positive as it is just what they do. They do whatever they do for whatever their reasons are. And if they're negative, well, that's their problem. And if, they have issues, that's their problem to deal with. It's not your problem. You're not around to fix everybody around you. That's arrogance.
Yeah.
You fix everybody around you. So how can I act positively with that person? What can I do? What can I not do? How should I, what should I do and what should I not do around that person to have a positive interaction with them? And then you do that. You learn to be positive with people, and then everybody likes you because you're very likable. You see, And it's just the opposite of nobody really likes you because you're always complaining and fussing and down. You're a downer. But then you get a whole bunch of people who are all downers, all commiserating about the misery in their life. And that in our culture is normal. That's what we have. We have a lot of people who don't particularly feel good about themselves or their life or what they're doing. And they sit around and have a little self-pity party or complain to each other, tell each other what their terrible problems are and commiserate. And, that's what we call socialization, right? Sitting around feeling miserable with somebody else, that's unfortunate. But it is a hard thing to break out of because you get so entranced in that. You're so focused on it that it's almost like somebody has to throw a bucket of cold water on you or something to get your attention to break out of that negative cycle, because our whole culture is like that. Most of your friends and neighbors and people at work and everybody pretty much tends to live around negativity. So for you to not do that takes some effort. It's going to take some effort to change how you see things. Change that perspective won't be easy. But it's not impossible. It's easier than you think. It's just the gumption to get started is the hard part. After that, it works pretty well because it's self-reinforcing.
Yeah. I think it's a great thing to start focusing on.
It is. It is.
Oh no, I was just about to say, especially as we get into the colder weather.
Oh yeah, that awful weather. That weather is so terrible around here. It's just really miserable all the time. It's too hot. It's too cold. It rains. It's too dry. It's just it's wonderful. It gives us so much to complain about. I really love the weather. Yeah, that's why I live in Canada, so it gives me something to complain about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yeah.
But I think the more we ponder gratitude, the more we just look at our perspectives and just be in the present moment and just say, you know what, right now, things are great. There's nothing going on right now that's, enough to take me out of this place. So let's just connect and just be. We just have to remember. It's like our memory cycle is like we know when we're in a good place. We can come up with all sorts of things and feel good about ourselves, and then something will happen, and there it goes. What? Wait, but we know better. It's just we forget. It's like we need to consciously remind ourselves every day. Mm-hmm. So doing 15 minutes, even 5 minutes of gratitude every day.
Mm-hmm.
Makes a huge difference in our life.
Yeah. Well, it's hard in our culture. Like I say, when your culture is negative, it's easy for you to slip back into it. When the people around you are negative, it's easy to slip into that and to be negative because they're negative. Oh, look at all those negative people, they make me angry. They're always so negative. Well, that's just you slipping right into the same thing that they're doing. But yeah, you just have to not go there. Just if you start feeling negative or complaining about something, oh, I planted grass 2 weeks ago and it hasn't rained since. It rained one time, just enough to make it germinate. Then it's been dry. We had drought ever since that. And you can fuss about that, but it just is what it is. If you have to plant it again or another time after that, or maybe drag your hose out there and water it. Or something else. Yeah. Well, you just have to figure it out and go do it. That's all. Don't complain about it. That's another thing people could do is to try to not complain. Like if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Just be quiet. And before you say anything, before a word leaves your mouth, is that going to be positive Or is that a complaint or an anger or, somehow pointing out to somebody else why they're wrong and how they should change? Is it negative? And if it's negative, just don't say anything. Just let it be. That could be a good thing to help too. And you could see, what do I spend my time doing? Do I spend my time watching negative things? Being negative, being involved in negative kinds of discussions. Well, then just stop. And if you can, then you have to start someplace. It is not necessarily an easy thing to do to change your attitude, but you can if you want to. I guess the key is you really have to want to. You really have to be committed to want to do it. Then it's not so hard. Finding that commitment to it and really wanting to do it, that's probably the harder part.
Yes, I think so. Hard, but not impossible. Just a conscious effort.
Yeah, and just take something small. You don't suddenly have to change your whole personality. Just take something small. Just decide to do something positive. Like exercise regularly. That's a positive thing. Just decide to do that. Like not complaining about the weather. That's a thing. Not complaining to your coworkers about the boss. Just let it be. And if you're around a bunch of people and they all start complaining, well, walk away. Don't participate in it. Or listen, but don't speak. You just have to take just one little thing at a time in your life and do that, and then do the next thing. And it won't take long. I suspect in just a few months, people could change themselves from basically unhappy, sad people to the happy people who feel like life is good. Because it actually is good. I mean, look at how many people around the world are miserable right now. Bombs are going off in their front yards. There's a lot of unpleasant things going on, but not in Canada. No. Not in Canada. Then there's bombs going off there. Well, that's something to have gratitude for. That's be very grateful for that you don't live in those kind of circumstances. There's lots of things to be grateful for and appreciate that we take for granted. It's funny, isn't it, that all the positive things in our life we tend to take for granted. Like even in a relationship, two people, and they've been together for 20 years or something, and all the positive things there they take for granted. Oh yeah, sure, he does that for me, and yes, she does that for me, and and these things happen, and all that's for granted. And if you didn't get it, you'd complain. But when you do get it, you don't feel gratitude. You see? So again, accentuate the negative, eliminate the positive seems to be where we are instead of just the other way around. It's where we need to be.
All right. Well, it was a good show. I think we touched on it all. It's some good points that have been made, though. So I'm show. All right. Well, you've been listening to News for the Heart. We've been getting to the heart of what matters with Tom Campbell and gratitude and positivity. And we'll be back next month. Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome, Laurie. Thank you.